The gentleman from Prince William, Mr. Futrell.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, continuing on with our theme of Black History Month, I had an opportunity to reflect. I had an opportunity to think about how I got to this position that we currently sit in. And I remember the day that I decided that I was actually going to run, and I had an opportunity to come down to Richmond, and they had a training, and they were explaining to us the things that we needed to do to be considered a viable candidate and how we had to work hard and do all of these different things. And at the end of that, a slender African-American man came up to me, and he said, "Son, do you really know what you're getting yourself into?" And he spoke very openly and very frankly for me. And he said, I tell you these things because I've already gone through it. He said, I've heard about a lot of the positive things that you've done to impact your community over the years. And he said, that's great. He said, but the thing that you have to remember is once you stepped into this political arena, there is a segment of the population out there now that is going to try to discredit everything that you've done. And you've got to be strong enough to stand up to that. And he continued on in a conversation. It was so open. It was one of the most open conversations that I had an opportunity to have with anybody about this political experience. And I said, wow. And he didn't really give me any of his background. The only thing that he told me was he'd gone through it himself. And so what I did was I went home that evening, and as soon as I arrived home, I immediately jumped on the computer. And when I jumped on the computer and I Googled his name, all of this wealth of information came up. I found out when we pulled him up, it said, this was the first African-American elected to the General Assembly after Reconstruction. And I said, wow, that's who I was sitting with. And I look at where I'm at. And when we sat down, I immediately reached back out to him and I said, I've got to pick your brain. I've got to understand what exactly is going to happen as I move forward. And so he called me down to his home. And he sat down, and of course, he goes through all of the data and all of the precincts. But what I was most intrigued with was the conversation of his experience, of his opportunities that he talked to me about when he said, this was a different era in time. And as a former teacher, I remember having those conversations with students. I remember talking to them what it was like during this time, understanding that there were poll taxes and literacy tests. And these were times when you could die for just encouraging African Americans to run for office, let alone being the person yourself to actually run. And not only did he run, but he won. Not only did he win, but he received the most votes on that ticket. Dr. William Ferguson Reid is an amazing man from Richmond that has accomplished so much. And it's almost a rite of passage at this point. It's a rite of passage for all of us to have the opportunity when we talk on the phones and you say, I'm considering running for office. One of the first questions we tend to ask each other is, did you have an opportunity to talk to Dr. Reid yet? Because he's going to reach out to you. And again, the wealth of knowledge that he's been able to give to these next generations that are coming. So last year I had the opportunity to stand up here and I had an opportunity to talk to you about the Stafford Training School and the impact that made on that community. But when I sit here and I talk about Dr. Ferguson Reid, the thing that jumps out to me was he was not just a politician. He was not just a surgeon. He was not just an African-American that had an opportunity to graduate from two of the country's HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. Dr. Ferguson was a symbol. He still is a symbol. So when I see Dr. Ferguson now, it opens my mind up to the possibilities of where we've come from and where we can go. So when I see the likes of the African-American, the Secretary of State, LeVar Stoney, or I look around this chamber and I see, Delegate McClellan or Delegate Herring or Delegate Torian, and I sit here and I have the opportunity to stand up as the youngest African-American in the General Assembly, I realize that I am able to do that because of the sacrifices for which he made before me. So as I come up here today, and I know many of us that are sitting here in the House know who Dr. Ferguson Reid is, I want to thank him for all that he has accomplished, not just for myself, but for the generations that are going to come after me. It is because of him that we have the opportunity to move another generation and move towards more diversity within the Commonwealth of Virginia. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and I thank you for all of those that have also made an impact over the years, and I look forward to where we're going to go in the future ahead.